everyone. My name is Was Rahman from UK Trade and Investment. Welcome to the Open to Export webinar on getting started in India. Thank you very much for all taking the time. I think for most people that are joining, it's still morning. From what I can see, there are a couple of people where it's just slipping into the afternoon. But we're looking forward to spending the next hour giving you some, hopefully some interesting and insightful views on how to get your business started in India. Before we begin, if I pass over to my colleague Joshua in the US to talk a little bit about housekeeping and to make sure everyone can hear properly. Joshua, over to you, please.
Much appreciated, Was. At the top right of your screen, attendees, you should see the GoToWebinar attendee control panel, and through this you can interact with us. You will find the audio portion of the control panel, and here you can switch from mic and speakers, which you may have joined automatically. If you can hear music through your computer, you'll be able to hear the presentation. If you would prefer to join the conference call via telephone, please select telephone in the audio portion of the control panel, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You can submit your questions and comments through the questions panel of this control panel. Please submit your questions anytime during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now, Was, back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. You'll have seen from your invites, everyone who's taking part today. I'm not going to spend too much time at the moment talking about the speakers. I'm going to jump us straight into the body of this and then keep talking as we're going about who you're listening to just before we start. The first thing that I think most people listening will be aware of is that this webinar has been organized through a service called Open to Export. It's a website that most of you will have seen in order to hear about the webinar you're on. It's a joint partnership between Haibu, a digital business organization from the UK that helps communities and businesses interact and succeed in their businesses, and UK Trade and Investment, the government organisation from the UK that helps businesses export and invest into the UK. Open to Export, you've probably all seen, it's a portal, an online portal that's designed to help small businesses in particular in the UK. It's been around for around a year, and if you haven't had a look, please take a look, www.opentoexport.com. You'll find articles, events, opportunities, and most importantly, I guess, the opportunity to ask questions from experts such as colleagues of mine in UK Trade and Investment, private sector partners, UK India Business Council, and others. You probably all know about Open to Export. What I'll do is get into the first poll, because I think in order to get us going, it would be useful to get a sense of how people are doing in their export journey. We have a number of 3 polls that we're going to be going through this morning. The first one is to get a sense of how experienced people are with exporting. What we'd like you to do is click on one of the 3 buttons that you can see in terms of your experience of exporting to India, because that gives the speakers a sense of who we're speaking to and what level to pitch our content at. While you're filling that out, the first speaker we'll hear from in a moment is James Bryce, Deputy Director of UK Trade and Investment in India. And James has a team of over 90 advisors spread across 9 locations in India. He's been a career diplomat since the 90s. He's worked and lived in a number of locations, including China, Italy, parts of Africa, Europe, and Japan. And he's been heavily involved in supporting businesses with their startup into India. And he's very, very experienced on some of the challenges and issues and the support. Very, very well networked. And I'd really recommend after we're done today, if you've got any questions, James is always a good person to speak to if you're looking at business in India. We've got around half of you have voted, so if we give you another few seconds for the rest of you to click your buttons, then we should be able to find out how we're doing. Just give it another moment or two. Okay, why don't we see what we're doing with the results? So what we've got, you'll see in your screens now, that just over half of the folks that we're talking to today are experienced exporters but are new to India. A very small number of exported to India in the past, and we've got about a third of folks that are new to exporting, which is fairly standard for the kind of audience that we see on Open to Export. With that in mind, I think what we'll do is jump over to James, who's going to give you an overview of how the Indian market looks from people in your position. If we could switch the slides over to James's presentation. And James, are you ready to go?
Yep, great. Thanks, Was. Good morning, everybody, or happy lunchtime in different parts of the world. I'm speaking to you from Mumbai. My objective is to give you an overview of India and UK business coming into India. Any more specific points we can deal with subsequently by email. Most of you are experienced exporters but are new to India. About a third of you are new to exporting. If you were looking around the world at the moment and thinking, where will I export to, why would you consider India? Well, as we know, it's economically a very difficult time in an awful lot of parts of the world. India has the advantage of being, it's both huge and it's high growth, and even when conditions are in cyclical terms difficult, its growth is enormous compared with other markets such as Europe. So at the moment, growth in India is, roughly speaking, 5%. The gloomiest forecasters think it might go down to 4 point something. That, for India, is rock bottom. It's double and more what most European countries get, even in a good period. But that, for India, is rock bottom. In good years, and we're there talking about much of the decade before the financial crisis, and frankly a lot of the last 20 years, Indian growth, thanks guys, Indian growth has been in the 9 to 10% bracket, so something off the scale by European standards. The population here, so your potential market, it's the second biggest population on Earth, more than 1.2 billion people. So in rough terms, between, well, a fifth or so of humankind, a fifth of the entire global population. Affluence is rising. A large part of that population is young. There are an awful lot of teens and 20s and 30s. So they want a better life than previous generations. They have high expectations. Aspiration is everywhere. Other aspects that would make India an attractive market compared with some other parts of the world, your political risk is a bit more measured. There is democracy here. Indians have great pride that the Republic has now been in place for 65 years, and they have no difficulty mounting a general election every few years. There are no problems with democracy. The country is, broadly speaking, politically stable. It enjoys the rule of law, a legal system which anyone familiar with a British legal system would recognize, and English is widely spoken. It's not universally spoken, it's the language of the comparatively well-educated, but it's widely spoken throughout the entire country. Now let me try to move on a slide. I'll just pause a second, see if that has worked. Let me try another button. Okay, I think I probably need to concede my PowerPoint driving license to Josh or someone. Could we move on to my next slide, which is the group photo? Sorry about that, Josh. All those characteristics, they mean, quite frankly, we want to promote India as a priority for UK trade and exports at the moment. You're all aware the government views it as an objective to help the UK in its current economic position to boost exports. India is a great opportunity. That makes it a priority, and here as UKTI, I'm speaking for the government. We want to help and support you, British companies, to make the most of your opportunities out here. That photo is the group photo from the biggest Prime Minister-led trade mission in British history, which came to India just a couple of months ago. Indeed, I'm somewhere around the margins of that photo, but it was, roughly speaking, 100 companies, a plane full of business people coming with the Prime Minister. And that is both, I hope, helpful to all the individual companies who took part. Our feedback from them suggests business is already flowing as a result. But bigger than that, a Prime Minister and a plane full of business people don't go somewhere very often. That's emblematic of the support we want to give, the priority the government wants to attach, and all we want to do here. Josh, may we go to the next slide now, please? Let me then talk about the challenges of doing business here. Okay, let me try. There we are. Let me explain the photo before I talk. So whilst I talk, you can take in the photo. I took that picture just a couple of weekends ago in a place where I randomly happened to be. It's in Bangalore, but it could be almost anywhere in India. I took it to illustrate what is a pretty typical shopping street. That is everyday life. Intentionally, I chose a street which is not too high-end, not too low-end. So there you are. You can see what it looks like. There's a bit of wealth. There's a fair selection of private vehicles, plenty of cabling, plenty of advertising, and an awful lot of people going about their shopping. That is ordinary Indian hustle and bustle. The more affluent places look more affluent. A village would be a little sparser than that, but a village in India is frankly bigger than a village in the UK, more like a town. The buildings might be 1 or 2 stories rather than 2 or 3. So that's a typical Indian commercial street. Challenges. Indian government is quite complex. The politics are very complicated, and that is a bit of a landscape to navigate. The country is split internally into 28 states, each of which, frankly, is the size of a country in Europe, with a population of at least tens of millions, and 9 union territories. Power is quite diffuse. There is real power at central government level, that's here called the union government, but also at state level. Indians, and I speak here humbly as a Brit who happens to live here, I've lived here for more than a year now, Indians, I feel, have a strong sense of identity, meaning if you come in here, you will have to work out how to sell things in a way that pitches the pitch to an Indian consumer. You can't assume that your marketing approach that has worked elsewhere will just translate into India. Then when you're in the country, internally it is also complex. Tamils in Tamil Nadu have a different sense of identity from Bengalis in West Bengal. I live in Maharashtra. Maharashtrians also have a very strong sense of identity. So you need to work the place out. I would then describe what does the economy here feel like, what do consumer groups feel like in terms of the next 3 tiers, next 3 bullets on my slide. Licensed sectors, urban India, connected India, and village India. Licensed sectors was how India used to be until 20 years ago. It used to be very heavily regulated. It still shows some signs of the transition away from that. Some sectors are heavily regulated. So if you're in specific kinds of things which are heavily regulated everywhere, like munitions or, for example, mobile phone networks, for that you'll be dealing very heavily with government. In most sectors, however, you can forget that. You're looking at one or other of the next 2, urban and connected India and village India. Urban India, frankly, looks pretty recognizable compared with much of Europe or the Western world that we're mostly familiar with. People live lifestyles we would recognize. They have access to services and utilities. They have expectations. They are connected. Village India is rather different. Up to 2/3 of the population lives in more meager circumstances. Their incomes are lower. There is a heavy dependence on agriculture. However, the key, I would say, across that entire background is aspiration is everywhere. Everyone sees movies, everyone sees telly, everyone knows what a better life looks like, and they're all striving, frankly, just in the way we do in Europe, to lead better lives themselves and for the next generation to lead a better life. Now let me move on one slide. Let me see if that's working. There we are. How do you get going in India? And again, I'll explain the photo so you can see what you're looking at whilst I talk. You need to work out this market and the consumers here. They want access, frankly, to all the sorts of things consumers everywhere else want, but the pitch needs to match their understanding, and because incomes are high for the highest but very low for many, they're often price conscious. So there you are. Tata Sky is a satellite TV company, and there's a pitch. Again, this is a poster I just took a snap of in the street a couple of weekends ago. Pitch to the price conscious Indian consumer. Satellite TV costs less than a samosa. UKTI, we deal with companies of all sorts of sizes and across all the sectors. The average, I would say, based on our experience, it takes 18 to 24 months to find the route to operating in India with profitability. There are many, many niches. How do you find your niche here? Well, you need to think through what is your comparative advantage. If you're bringing something into India which isn't already here and you find the right way in, it all should go very well for you. If you're bringing something in which is already in the Indian market and you produce it or do that good or service on a European cost base, and it's already here on an Indian cost base, then frankly, you need to think about that. It may be rather difficult. Beyond that, it's a matter of finding the way in and having the grit to get through the 18 to 24 months. Those of you who are experienced exporters in other markets, it will be different, it will have Indian characteristics, but it will be analogous to the experience you've had going into other markets. How can UKTI help? I hope many of you already have some experience of UKTI, but let me outline a little of what we do just in case you don't. You'll see my bracket on the screen that you have to be a UK registered company or create jobs in the UK in order for us to work for you. That's because we are taxpayer funded. Some of our services are free, some of them are chargeable. Even the chargeable services we do not remotely charge full economic cost. And we are an entity of the British Civil Service. So if you pay your taxes, you get us. Some chargeable services, obviously, we have to charge in addition. But that's the basic threshold. You must be a UK registered company or create jobs in the UK to get us to work for you. What can we then do? Initial conversations or briefings such as this one now, we can provide very readily. We do that for free. If you want initial conversations with someone who's knowledgeable about your sector, we can put you in touch with one of my team here who does that. And that's all free. We can provide more tailored, bespoke market information for you once we know a little bit more about what the sorts of things you want. That's where we start to get into chargeable services, but it's not full cost. If you want something such as a warmed-up list of potential distributors, we can do that research for you here. If you want to come to visit, and there is no substitute really for ground truth, if you want to come and see, we can organize a program for you. If you are a little uncertain about what you want in a program, you can join a trade mission. We run, call it roughly 20 trade missions a year to India, where it's more like, as it were, the package tour. You buy a package, we'll introduce you to a range of suitable people, but you don't need to take all the decisions yourself rather than buying the package. We work closely with our partners like London and Partners, Scottish Development International, Invest in Northern Ireland, the Welsh Government, and others. All told, that's upwards of 25 trade missions organized by government entities from the UK to India every year. So I hope there are avenues in for you there to learn the market and to keep control of your costs. Beyond that, you can find us on Open to Export or the UKTI website. We have advisors based in the UK regions called International Trade Advisors. We also have sector specialist experts, and my colleague Woz, who's on the call, is one of those. Let me move on. I'm conscious, Woz and Sean, I'm overrunning slightly, so I'll speed up. Let me show you some of the sectors which go well for us in India and the locations where we are. We have, roughly speaking, 90 advisors spread across 9 locations. That's everywhere where you can see a little pink sun on the map. We hope to expand that network to more locations in the future, though that is subject to Indian government permission. The list of sectors on the left of the slide are ones where it goes particularly well for us. So engineering, commercial services, creative, defense, education, energy, environment, financial, health, ICT, infra, life. We also do promotion of investment by Indian companies back into the UK. We are also, although we are restricted by government constraints about the manner of service we provide, we can work for a British company in any sector. So if you're in a sector which is not on that screen, we can still help you. Let me end by simply putting up my contact details. We will respond very readily to any queries any of you give to us over Open to Export. Once the Easter break is over, I'll be back at that email address. Very happy to deal with any queries you have via email. If you end this briefing thinking you're interested in India, but you still don't quite know what to do, I would recommend a phone call to one of our sector people who will be able to speak the language of your sector a bit better and just talk it over. We would not recommending you coming to India and spending money investing in possibilities if you were not comfortable. So please don't feel that you have to enter into any commitments, but we'd be delighted to speak to you further. And at that point, I think that's me done. So I'll pass back to Woz.
Okay, great. James, thank you so much for that. Just to spend a couple of minutes talking through how we can use the remaining half hour or thereabouts of this webinar for the maximum value for everyone. You've just heard from James, and that was the kind of overview, introduction, a sense of the opportunities, and a touch on some of the barriers. You're going to hear from two more speakers. Next, we're going to be hearing from a gentleman who's started a business, taken it abroad, and gone through some of the challenges that James has described. So you'll be hearing some of the practical implications of some of these points. I'm going to close off with a session where I go through some of the questions that people typically have been asking, or the lessons learned, the kind of practical challenges that people face when they're trying to put these ideas into practice. And we've got plenty of time for Q&A at the end. In the meantime, if you want to ask questions while we're going, we've already got one or two which I'll pick up, then we can make this as interactive as you like. So feel free to type in questions as you're going. I can see them and we can pick them up. Before we get into the next speaker, I want to do another poll. We've got a poll which talks about where you normally direct your exporting questions to. And the reason this is important is because there are plenty of places you can go to try and get answers to some of your questions, and it's not always obvious who should be able to help. And so there's a number of folks that you can talk to. James has talked about UKTI. On Open to Exports, you can ask questions openly, and there'll be a number of people who can respond. And questions like this help us understand who we should be organizing to provide that support from you through Open to Exports. And we've got a number of you clicking. We're getting a fair number of answers, and as we're expecting, it's a mixture of most of these. So I'll give you another few seconds. In the meantime, James, if you're still open, we've got a question from someone who's asked what qualities are needed to succeed in India. It says specifically as a trading agent, which is what the person that asked the question is asking about. But actually, just a more general question, James, what would be the qualities you think that someone would need if they wanted to take their business to India and they wanted to succeed? As an individual, I think, let's make it about the people that are going to try and do this. What's your view, James? The qualities needed to succeed in India?
Off the top of my head, I would say things like practicality, openness, and a bit of determination. Practicality in the sense that there is nothing to be afraid of in India. Jump on in, and I say that on the basis of the fact, as I said, I've lived here for a year. I'm now completely at home. If you had asked me was I completely at home in my first 3 weeks, I probably would have given a slightly more nuanced answer. Jump in and get on with it. I'm conscious in the business environment that has costs, so you need to manage all that, but jump in. Openness in the sense that India has a sense of what it is. Indians have a sense of who they are. They want the best of international goods and services. That doesn't mean they want them just the same way that everywhere else has them. They want to develop in an Indian manner, and you need to be sensitive to that. That's just the reality. And beyond that, determination, it takes a bit of a journey. We've had companies come on trade missions and things have sparked, and they've said to us they've been making money from contacts in India just a few months later. However, I must be honest and say that's the minority experience. 18 to 24 months is our consistent estimate. And if you're really in the high-value goods and services in fields like infrastructure at that end of the market, it's a matter of years. Equally, when you get in here, it's huge. It's a huge market, so it's worth it.
Thanks very much for that, James. I'm just going back to the poll. As I'd expected, it's a fair spread of answers to the questions. You can see on your screen that UKTI and the Internet seem to be quite useful places for people starting. But I think we also find that various chambers of commerce and talking to each other are equally important. And finally, when it comes to particularly specialist niche questions or particularly deep answers, the professional services organizations that we work with are incredibly useful. Someone has asked a question about whether you start with UKTI, going on a trade mission, UK-India Business Council, Chambers of Commerce. And I think the answer is all of the above. I think it was Simon Sheridan that asked the question. The answer really is all of the above, but I think the idea is to use your time while you're in the UK to go to a broad number of people, compare the answers and use that to figure out your kind of strategy and your first steps, and then get more specific as you get into the market. What we're going to do now is hear from Simon Poole. Simon's founder and managing director of Pro2, which is a terribly interesting organization. I'm not sure if this is something you talk about a lot, Simon, but you started life as an investment banker, but it's much more now about a professional instructor of driving. I think you had a racing license in 2001, and you've now been running an organization that provides specialist drivers and instructors and trainers, people like Lotus Driving Academy, Land Rover Experiences, Alpha Specialists. If you could spend a few minutes telling us about your experience of taking your business to India, I think that'll put a lot of what we've heard about into practice. Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Woz. Good morning, everybody. But Woz has left the cat out of the bag about my investment banking background, and I normally try and keep that very quiet. I'm going to start again with a cardinal sin, really, of an apology. My presentation, the last time I delivered this, was half an hour, so apologies if I sort of flick through some of the slides a little bit quicker than I would do normally. But there are some key points that I want to get out of this presentation that are, I'll concentrate more on as we go through the presentation. Just a very brief background to the company. Woz has sort of given you a bit about my background. We formed the company in 2007. Just to put this into context, really, we are a very small business. There is a sort of general idea that you need to have a turnover of millions to look at exporting, especially to India, and this hopefully sort of proves the case otherwise. In the UK and Europe, we're suppliers to Land Rover, Lotus, but have started in India working with a couple of the biggest automotive manufacturers, Tata Motors and Mahindra. And our product is very specialist, so we are very much a niche business, as James was talking about earlier. There are obviously opportunities for niche businesses, and I'll sort of talk about that in a bit more detail further on. How did I come to be invited to this? We're a UKTI Asia showcase company. UKTI have been very good to us. I'll sort of talk about how they've helped us in some ways further on. And as part of being an Asia Showcase company, we have been helped, or we've been pointed in the direction of how we can inspire other companies to look to Asia for opportunities and growth, and that's one of the reasons I'm on this call. So our journey in India was really started in 2009. We were looking at opportunities of expanding the business, and we thought it's something we had done before as a contractor or as a supplier. And so we looked at whether we were able to do it as an independent company. So we sort of said, look, yes, time is right to export. And the next question was, where do we go? We came up with this suggestion of probably the three biggest markets in the world at the moment, US, China and India. We then approached UKTI and asked them, is this feasible? They told us, don't be silly, three biggest markets in the world, you're a fairly small company, you need to really concentrate on one. So India was the one we picked on, but mainly because of an opportunity that we got through UKTI. And I can't sing its praises highly enough. The UKTI India Marketing Scholarship Program that runs every year, it is free. It is a scholarship that you get most of your costs contributed to. We went out in March 2010 with a group of other UK companies you can see on the picture there, and it was a 1-week intensive program at the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, which is the best business college in India, and actually one of the best business colleges in the world. And as I say, what it really gave us was an insight into India from a business perspective, but also a cultural perspective. So it gave us sort of hints and tips of how to deliver business in India. You know, the key ways that you should approach Indian companies and Indians in general. As a result of the scholarship, we decided that India was definitely the right market for us. So we took the next step was really to put our toe in the water effectively. So we exhibited at a trade show, and on the back of just going to that one trade show, we won a small bit of business with Mahindra. So delivering, again, some very specialist training, but engineer training in August 2011. And it's from there really that the business has taken off. It's certainly a case that in our business, if you work with one manufacturer, other manufacturers certainly want to see and see what you're doing with them. The sense of competition between certainly the three largest manufacturers in India is intense. So if you are delivering business with one, you know, the others very quickly follow suit, which obviously works fantastically for us. We've now delivered work for Maruti as well, which is the third of the top three. Tata Motors, I mentioned Mahindra earlier, BMW India. All of the big manufacturers are, if not based out in India and have factories out in India, then they certainly have a big presence. So again, for our business, it is a key market. Land Rover, being Tata owned, Indian company owned, funnily enough, don't have a particularly big presence in India. Because we work for them over in the UK, they've been asking for our advice of how to deliver certain services in India. And this is probably a key point. The projection for our business over the next 3 to 5 years is that 60% of our income will come from India. It really is that huge, and the potential is really that big. It is, you know, I'm not saying it will necessarily be the case for everyone's business, but certainly where we are, it is a tremendous opportunity. And I think this is probably true for a lot of the markets, a lot of the industries in India. For us, the automotive market is at a stage of maturity, the stage of growth that is probably equivalent to about 10 years ago in UK and Europe. So there is an opportunity to get in using effectively 10 years worth of experience into India and be able to deliver real tangible benefits. These are the key slides really I want to talk about in probably a bit more detail if I've got time. What are the lessons we've learned? I think the key thing is, and James touched upon it as well, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. India is a very, very complex, very culturally relationship-driven country. So you need to understand, effectively, there's no point in going in with a very Western European or even English attitude. You need to understand how to talk, how to interact with Indian businesses. For us, UKTI Marketing Scholarship was absolutely fantastic and gave us more information in a week than we probably could have got with sort of visits over 2 or 3 years. This is something that the next part society. They don't like to offend, so that means they will agree to pretty much everything you ask them, which can be, do you want to commit? Do you want to sign up to this sort of business? They will say yes, and you will think, well, I've won some business. But then over the next week or 2 weeks, when you're trying to actually capitalise on it, you'll find that either they won't answer your emails, they're busy on the phone when you phone, or they just don't actually physically commit to the work. So yes may actually mean no, and there are ways and means that you might have to work out when yes does actually mean yes. And for us, definitely face-to-face works best. I think they're probably a bit more used to European companies coming over there now and you know, literally dipping their toe in, coming back to their home market, and trying to deliver the business or trying to communicate via email or phone call. As I say, they really value the relationship aspect of doing business. So face-to-face really does work best. And again, emphasise that you are there for the long term. It is a key thing to develop a long-term business strategy with India. Really, because this face-to-face relationship is how they work. They want to get to know you before they do any business with you. And they don't really want to think, right, okay, well, I'm going to see this guy, but I may not see him for another 6 months, a year, 2 years, if they're not going to be here in the long term. A key, you know, again, James mentioned it. A key thing for any English company or British company going out there is it is the business language. So you won't have any problems with communicating, especially in any sort of business terminology or aspect. And again, don't underestimate how long it actually may take to win business. Bureaucracy is stifling. Even getting a visa is not straightforward. You really have to, you know, dot the I's, cross the T's with a lot of things that that you are doing out there. I mentioned that you don't need to be a multi-million-pound company to work in India or deliver business in India. One thing that you do need, though, is to have a realistic marketing budget. Going back to the face-to-face works best. You need to invest time and effort in going over there. Don't expect to just go over there once and you know, have the business given to you on a plate. It really does pay to go over there as often as you can. Obviously, maximise the time when you're over there. See as many people as you can. You know, make sure that you visit the different hubs in your own particular business, and you know, don't skimp on the marketing budget. The last bit, I'll try and whiz through this one a bit quicker, is use all the resources you've got available to you. We were very fortunate, sort of fell into using UKTI. I found them a fantastic resource. I get on very well with the automotive lead in India. He has been fantastically helpful, and I can't sing his praises highly enough. We've got there's a UK organisation called UKIBC. They are obviously focused on matching Indian and UK companies. They have a wealth of knowledge and experience in sort of business intelligence, etc. Also, lean on your trade body. We have SMMT, or the MIA, Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, and Motorsport Industry Association. They are the ones that primarily will be involved in either trade missions or events. So lean on them for help and assistance. That is probably how you can get a lot of the government assistance that's out there. Also, don't be afraid to use your contacts. We've brought in a non-executive director. He had a background in the UK engineering sector primarily, but he had he'd spent 18 months as the head of engineering at Tata Motors, and we just leaned on him for contacts when we went out there. And lastly, the value of PR out in India. You've seen from James' picture, advertising is absolutely everywhere. So use your brand and understand the value of PR in India. We made contact fairly early on with, again through UKTI in India, with the editor of Autocar India. First time I went out there, or second time actually, I think I went out there, I got an interview in Autocar India, which obviously is a huge publication like it is here. Don't underestimate the value of PR. And this is the last little bit. Again, I'm conscious, apologies that I've overrun slightly. Pick the right time to join UKTI support programs. They are fantastic. They are very good. They do give you some grants, some support monetarily as well as obviously intellectually. But make sure that you're at the right time in terms of your export journey to join the support programs. There are two. Passport to Export is the initial one. It only lasts for a year, and then you move on to the Gateway program. Again, that is only for a year. Ideally, they should last for a little bit longer, but don't obviously join them too early on, because then obviously you could potentially not be delivering business at the end of them, and then you still have a support network from UKTI, but you don't necessarily get the full benefit of the programs. And that, I think, is it. I'm very comfortable answering any questions. I've given you my email address and our website, which has some insight again into what we've delivered out in India. I hope that was useful, and by all means, ask me any questions at all.
By all means, send emails to James and Simon as per the details they've given you. But actually, putting your questions on Open to Exports is the best way of getting a multiple set of answers to your questions. And Simon and James are one of two of several people that are available to answer your questions. Okay, what we're going to do in the next few minutes is, Josh, if we can get to my opening slide, I'll take control of the slides, because we're going to use the next few minutes to finish the webinar with questions. And we've got a whole set of questions from people that are on at the moment, and I'll run through a few of those. I just want to summarize. What we've heard so far is that India is big, it's fast-growing, it's full of business opportunities. I think it's pretty clear that it's a long journey. James mentioned 18 months, 24 months to make profit, but the profit will be lucrative if you go about it right. I think one of the things that we want people to understand if they're going to succeed in India is that it's doable, there's plenty of help. You need to balance the enthusiasm, the excitement, the optimism with the challenges. And with that in mind, there's three sets of questions that I'd like us to cover, including the ones that people are asking. Firstly, what are the typical questions people ask when they're getting started? We've heard one or two. We've talked about the question that Frankie asked. I'm going to cover off the questions that we've got from John, Simon, Victoria, Robert, and Pradeep, because they all, I think, are relevant. I think there are some classic mistakes that people make. So what I'm going to do after that is go back to the other two speakers. If there's one thing that you'd known when you started, what would that be, is what we'll talk about next. And I think the other really interesting thing for me is that there comes a point at which you should be ready to really make a lot of money. And it should be something like 6 to 12 months after you've got going. If at that point you've done the right things, you should be good to go. So we'll go through some of the things that you should use as your checklist to make sure that you're now at the point where you put your foot on the accelerator, stop thinking and preparing, and start doing. But if I start off with some of the questions that people have been asking, first and foremost, people talk about India and assume it's one country. It is one country, but it's it's also a mixture of 20 or 30 states and regions that are countries in their own right. And so when people say, where do I start? The answer isn't India. The answer isn't all of India. The answer is the right bit of India for your business. And I think we've got a question from one person that says, which are the regions or states that are most UK business friendly? Where's their list, less bureaucracy? Actually, I don't think they're the right questions. I think they're useful questions, but there are other factors more than just being business friendly. I mean, I don't think you're going to find a lack of bureaucracy anywhere in India. That's just something you have to deal with. But the regions that matter are the regions where your particular industry, your set of contacts, the businesses that you want to work with have the strength. James, you might want to expand on this, but the idea of choosing where to begin, I think people tend to go to the cities they visit. They go to the places where the trade mission they're on happens to have been, and they often miss out the lesser known states that might have other advantages. Do you want to comment a little bit on the regions and states you want to start with in India?
Yes, thanks. I would say as you take forward your India journey, essentially the initial phase you'll be working out not only where is right for your business, but also frankly where you're comfortable, since you're putting some of your capital at risk. If you were to talk to one of our advisors, across all the sectors you're in, frankly, all our different advisors would point you in slightly different directions. And I mean by that, if you're in a high-tech business, well, India has the places to go for that, the likes of Bangalore or Hyderabad. If you're in the auto business, as Simon is, then places such as Pune and part of Maharashtra are very good for that. If you're in retail, you might aim towards both some of the biggest developed cities already, but also some of the high-growth inland second-tier cities. So the answer will be different in every sector. And frankly, where you feel it's right and you're comfortable will only emerge from a little bit of a journey. Unfortunately, we and you, or you and any advisors you may be talking to, frankly, about India, you're quite unlikely to complete that journey in your first, 2 weeks or in your very first visit. So as you do the mix of research you can do from the UK, talking to advisors and people out here, and actually coming and visiting, and I echo what Simon said, you really do need to visit to see what it's like. You will sense what is the right balance for you, but 30-odd businesses on the line, the answer of where to go would actually be different for every single one of you and would take a little bit of learning.
There's a couple of questions that people have asked, thanks for that, James, around distributors, setting up offices, and the classic that everyone always asks at some point is, how do I set up an Indian company? And I think one of the things that's coming out from my experience of working in India is that you don't necessarily need an office that you've set up in order to sell in India, and you certainly don't need to have set up an Indian company that does the sorts of things that Indian partners will do. But the question about whether you hire a distributor, how you set up a company, I think varies from sector to sector. Simon, one question I had for you is, have you actually set up an Indian company, or did you feel the need to set up an Indian company? And if so, just a few seconds on how that decision got made in the experience.
We haven't, and it's one of those things that actually we were given advice. There is a right time and a wrong time to set up a company. Again, as with anything in India, the bureaucracy around setting up a company is absolutely mammoth, and with it come their own set of rules and regulations, the filing of accounts, etc., etc. So it should only be at a stage where you're generating enough income and see the viability of setting up a company that you should do it. You can use the office, representative office, distributor, etc., to do a lot of that for you. And there is a strong sort of network of those types of support organisation out there.
I'm going to add one other comment to that, which is setting up an Indian company, once you get the right support, is manageable. Running an Indian company in terms of the paperwork is quite tricky, but the shock for me when I went through this experience was shutting down an Indian company is terribly difficult. It actually took 3 times as long to shut down the company and move to a different model than it did for us to set up a company. There's an interesting question that people are asking about making money because prices being so low. I think one of the things that we'll find when we move on to the next slide is that if there's one thing that people need to know when they get to India, I believe, it's understanding how your product and how your service is going to make money, because it probably isn't the same sort of model as in the UK, and it's a model that embraces the fact that people are very price conscious. You may end up selling your core product at a much lower price, but whether it's because of the volumes, whether it's because of the way in which you add value to your product, whether it's because of the people that you work with to sell an overall set of products and solutions into a service, you can make an awful lot of money in a slightly different way. And low unit prices are not necessarily a barrier to being very, very successful. I think there's another lesson that I've certainly seen a lot of people learn, which is that you tend to go into India with perceptions and stereotypes about customers, about your competitors, about the red tape, and about selling in India generally. I think leaving those perceptions and stereotypes with you at the airport when you leave and being very open-minded to how things really are is one of the most important things that I think I certainly needed to relearn very much when I started working in India about a decade ago. Simon, if you had one thing that you'd have wished you'd known when you got started on your India journey, what would it have been, do you think?
As I said in the presentation, really, how much time it would take to invest in actually getting to a point where obviously we can deliver some regular business. A common mistake is literally just to go over there, you get the follow-ups, perhaps you don't follow them up as quickly as you should do, and before you know it, it's sort of 6 months down the line, and you need to redo that every time you go over there. So it's literally just, you know, have a proper business strategy, business development strategy for India in your mind's eye almost before you go out there.
James, you have a quick answer to that question?
I'd come back to your point there about pricing. My answer to that would be once you've made your sort of first investigations about India and you have a bit of a sense of what's here, then, as it were, one of the hardest questions you don't answer by being here. You answer within your own company. What is your value proposition? What is your comparative advantage? And you may actually end up selling only part of all the range of goods and services you have for other markets. You may sell a basic version or a stripped-down version or one technology amongst the array that your company may have, but the scale of the Indian market is such that if that thing goes like hotcakes, you know, you'll do extremely well. People here at the high end, the rich in India are frankly richer than the rich in Britain and consume everything there is, including at world premium prices. The value consumer has a lot less money in their pockets than a British basic consumer, and it takes a certain amount of persuasion to get them to see value in your product. So it's answering that question, what am I bringing in that makes me special? But once you've worked that out, as was said, in a market of this scale, where people are open-minded and aspirational, the potential for making money off that is enormous.
I'm going to start closing. We were meant to run for an hour. The scheduled time is 10:30. We'll probably go about a minute over if that's all right with everyone on the webinar. Couple of questions that people have asked about trade missions to India and how developed the sector is. We'll be able to answer those offline after the webinar, so we'll send details to the people that have asked about the Marketing Strategy Scholarship, the next set of UKTI trade missions, and some specifics on one or two sectors like the pharma industry. There's a couple of technical questions on things like how commodities traders can secure payment when they're offering cash on delivery. And that's the kind of question that I'd suggest gets put onto the Open to Export website. So I think there's a wide set of people that would be able to answer that. I just want to wrap up with 4 things that I'd suggest people think about when they are 6-12 months down the line. Has your value proposition been Indianized? Is it clear how the Indian market is going to understand and receive value from your value proposition? And are you clear how you're going to grow it so that it will deal with customers in the hundreds of thousands and millions? Because if you can't do that, you've missed the opportunity to scale up and really embrace what India's about for business people. There'll come a time when paperwork and red tape, much as we don't like it, it's in hand. It's a necessary evil. You need to be able to deal with it. And if you get to the airport and you find you're still uncomfortable with the poverty, with the traffic, with whatever else it is that often freaks people out on the first visit, you're not quite ready. Things like business etiquette, things like timekeeping, understanding how to manage a network. There's a whole set we could talk about on all of these. But what I'd suggest is there are a set of things that you need to be ready to spot when you're ready to make money in India. And for me, they're those sorts of things. I'm going to start wrapping up now. You've got my contact details there. You can find me on the internet. But what I'd like us to close with is a few thoughts from people on the last poll, which is the biggest barriers to doing business in India. While you're answering that question, I'm going to give you a few thoughts on what's happening with Open to Export over the next few months. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. This is one in a series of webinars. We're going to be announcing the next topic shortly. Visit Open to Export for more information and you'll be able to register. When we finish this webinar, you'll be asked for feedback on how we've done, 1 to 5. It'd be very useful if you could answer that because we do want to keep improving these. Any questions that you've asked that we haven't responded to, we're going to answer them offline after the webinar. In the meantime, we're going to do a record. We've done a recording of this webinar. It'll be available so that you can re-listen to any of the answers and give us your thoughts and ask any further questions. I think we're pretty much done. If we can have a quick look at the answers. What we're finding around India is that most people think finding trading partners and finding knowledge are the two biggest things. I think for those, I'll end up with a shameless plug for Open to Export. It's there to give you knowledge. It's there to help you find trading partners and other contacts. And with that, thank you very much for the speakers. Thank you very much for the organizers. And thank you very much for everyone that's taken part. We've really enjoyed ourselves. Hope you found it useful and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.